Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to the Red Rabbit Hole. You are here once again. Thank you so much for continuing to come back and joining us as we take these little jaunts into the rabbit holes that authors go down when they are writing their thriller fiction books. And we are joined again this week by the lovely Bridget. Welcome back, Bridget.
Thank you very much for having me again.
How was your week? Did you enjoy the I was going to say there wasn't much in the way of us giving you any food or looking after you. Yeah, sorry. There's not much hospitality down the Red Rabbit Hole.
I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten for a week. So
So you mentioned the coffins in the last episode that the Victorians used, just in case they were worried they were getting buried alive. I'm just thinking, did you feel like for the whole week from the first episode to this one that you were in one of those coffins, just frantically ringing that bell, hoping that someone would save you?
I was ringing the bell and no one came. And I'm just wasting away here now. So hopefully I'll be able to get some food after this.
Well, nobody saves you from the Red Rabbit Hole. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. Once you're down that hole, that's it. You're just one of us now.
But you do have your guest pass, so you can leave, but not yet, because we were talking. So Nicky, you're here as well, I hear. That's nice.
I am. So, hi listeners, you know me. I don't think I even need to introduce myself anymore, but I am NV Peacock. I'm a thriller author too, but I am better known as Nicky to my friends and family. So you are my friends and family listeners. You can call me Nicky too. You can call me other things. You can call me Miss Peacock if you particularly want to. I mean, I'm not a doctor like Bridget, but you can call me Dr. Peacock or Professor Peacock. Oh my God, Professor Peacock.
Oh, that's great.
Lady Peacock.
So I'm going to call you from now on in. Actually, you never said I could call you Nicky. Just everyone else.
You've always called me Nicky. You call me Nick.
I do, yeah. Yeah, do you like it? Or are you like, no? I really don't like being called Lise. My name's short enough. I'm like, just keep the other bit in there. It's like a tiny name. And it always makes me think of like leasing something. Like I'm going to lease out a carpet cleaner or something. But anyway, let's get back to the wonderful Dr. Bridget Walsh, who was going to tell us about another rabbit hole that you've gone down related to a true crime. And I believe that this is a true crime that may well be one that could take me out. I think there are many but my love of chocolate will make me particularly vulnerable to this one, I think. Can you tell us all about it?
Yeah, so this is a case I read about when I was doing my PhD. And I remember, they talk about truth being stranger than fiction. This truly is, because after a while, I thought, I'd love to write a book about this. And I started writing it. And then I was talking about bits of it with my husband. And he was saying, that's just ridiculous. And I was saying, no, but that's really what happened. And he was saying, yeah, but I think I don't know that a reader is going to buy into it. So I kind of wrote this as a novel back in 2016. It was a terrible novel that wisely was ignored by every agent I sent it to. But I'm so interested in this case that I am at the moment trying to go back and turn it into a better novel. But the case I'm talking about is the Christiana Edmonds, also known as the chocolate cream poisoner. So this all happened in 1871.
She sounds so tasty.
She does sound so tasty, but really don't be tempted. That's all I'm saying. Accounts vary. Some people say there was no evidence that she had an affair with a married man, Dr. Beard. Other accounts say, yeah, she definitely had an affair with him and he was just trying to kind of keep it covered up. Something went on, whether it was all in her head or whether they genuinely had a relationship. But he was married and he eventually called off the relationship with her or didn't want so much to do with her. So she decided that she would try to kill his wife because that's what you do when somebody ends a relationship. And so she injected some chocolates with strychnine. Strychnine poisoning is a particularly unpleasant way to die. It's really nasty. And she, according to all the accounts at the trial, she fed Dr. Beard's wife with one of these chocolates, actually placed it in her mouth, which again seems such a weird thing. And again, my husband was kind of going, no one would do that. I said, but she did do it. And Emily Beard, who was Dr. Beard's wife, she got very ill, but she didn't die. And the Beards put two and two together and thought, okay, we think this might have something to do with Christiana having come round with these chocolates. So they completely cut her off, didn't want anything to do with that. And she was desperate to prove it hadn't been her. So she embarked on this kind of crime spree that the remarkable thing is only one person died. So what she did was she went into chocolate shops, the chocolate shop particularly of a Mr. Maynard, who I think might have been the original Mr. Maynard of Maynard Sweets. I don't know, I never got to the bottom of that particular rabbit hole. But she would go in, or she would just pay like young lads on the street to go in and buy some chocolates. She'd take them home, she'd inject them all with strychnine, and then she'd take them back to the shop, or she'd get a young lad to take them back to the shop saying, oh, these weren't the ones we wanted. And then Mr. Maynard would put them back out on sale, not knowing that they were with strychnine. And she also sent boxes of poisoned chocolates anonymously to various people. She was trying to sort of deflect attention away from herself at having tried to kill Mrs. Beard. And in the end, a young boy was killed, him and his family. This all happened in Brighton. They'd gone down to Brighton on holiday and he wanted a treat and he was bought these chocolates and he was young and so the quantity of strychnine in there killed him. And it all led back to Christiana Edmonds and she became known as the chocolate cream poisoner, among other things. But it was just such an outlandish case. You know, it's the kind of thing that if you were completely making it up from scratch, you'd think, oh no, I can't. No, that's too much. I can't have them doing that. And yet she did do it. And things like when she was, spoiler alert, when she was eventually found guilty, she pretended she was pregnant. So what happened at the time was if you maintained you were pregnant, then a group of matrons, as they referred to them, would basically kind of do an internal examination to establish, and she wasn't pregnant at all. She was just kind of desperately trying to find her way out of it somehow. But you know, it's so extreme and so outlandish, and this kind of indiscriminate nature of it all. That she was making sure that these chocolates were sold, and she was fundamentally, I think, trying to blame Mr. Maynard, who had nothing to do with any of it at all. But he was inadvertently selling poisoned chocolates, and as I say, strychnine it's a really horrible way to kill somebody. It's gruesome. And yeah, so she did this and I wrote this book about her, which wasn't very good, where I had her falling in love with somebody. And a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist said, but she's a psychopath, Bridget. And I was kind of going, well, was she a psychopath? And she said, my friend was going, well, she killed somebody, you know, and she tried to kill several other people. And I was saying, yeah, but you know, in my version, you know, she's got reasons for why she wants to kill him. And then I went away and I started writing the books that are now published. And I went back to it and I thought, oh yeah, she's a complete psychopath. What was I thinking? And so I'm now rewriting the book, and she is a psychopath. There's no question about that. But I just think it's such a fascinating story, and I'm having to play a lot with the actual facts because, as I say, it's so bizarre and extreme. You think I don't think I could put this in a book as it actually happened. But it is one of my favourite cases that I found about for my PhD.
So this case, did you tumble down that rabbit hole for a Variety Palace mystery book, or is this a different series, or just a different book altogether?
This is a different book. I'm being unfaithful to Minnie and Albert, who are my protagonists in the Variety Palace, and it does feel like I'm being unfaithful, I have to say. But this book has sort of been lurking at the back of my mind since 2016 when I wrote it, and God, I was so proud of myself. I wrote it on the bus going to and from work. I thought, excellent, I've written a book. But yeah, it's still there, and a few people read it at the time, and you know, wisely made the comments that they did. But then those people have since said, you know, I'd love for you to go back to that book. And I just thought, you know, I think I'm going to give it a go and see. And it might, you know, nobody might be interested in it. I don't know, but I thought let's let's see what happens. And it does bring in a new police officer, Sergeant Gibbs, who investigates the fictionalized Christiana Edmonds. And I did think, oh, he might be able to get a series out of him. But anyway, we're at very early stages.
Kind of remind this case when I looked into it. She ended up in Broadmoor, didn't she?
She did.
So she was like for criminally insane. It very much reminded me of the Chicago Tylenol murders.
Oh yeah.
Oh, tell me about that.
Very, very similar well, obviously it wasn't chocolate and it wasn't a woman and it wasn't in Victorian England. It was in, there's a lot there's a lot of actual differences now I think of it. But in 1982 there was a spate of deaths. There was actually more deaths. There was about 7 people that died, and it had been kind of traced, their poisonings had been traced back to them taking Tylenol, and the Tylenol that they had was laced with cyanide.
Oh God.
There's been no suspects. Nobody's been charged with anything. Nobody knows really what happened, but it was only in certain places but random people, because the killer would not know really who ate that Tylenol, who took that Tylenol, as in Christiana wouldn't really realize, and especially with chocolate, she's got to assume it's going to be a lot of kids.
Yeah,
and clearly didn't care, and she brought this box of chocolates to the Beers' house, and they, I think from memory, had children, so the chocolates would have been there. It just defies belief.
I can verify it wouldn't have stayed there. If there were children around, they would have had that. Mine can climb walls for sweets, honestly.
Arguably, if she's a psychopath, she wouldn't care anyway. And partly if all she wanted was the man, and psychopaths, you were right in saying they don't really fall in love. It's not really love that they're looking for, but it's some kind of status. It's, she's convinced herself that, she needs this man for whatever reason for herself. Then, killing the kids is probably a bit of a bonus to her. In terms of just,
get them out of the way.
Exactly, because she wouldn't want to be the evil stepmom to, a couple of orphaned children. But it just kind of, and there's been a lot of copycat cases from the Tylenol murders as well. But it sounds like this one obviously happened first, so that perhaps the Tylenol murderer got their inspiration from this case in terms of, how to do things. Because I'm assuming with the kind of, even back in the 80s, the kind of security that Johnson & Johnson would have had, and the randomness of the pills and where they went and who took them would mean to me that it was more of a kind of end supply chain thing. So either on the truck going to wherever chemist it was going to, or actually at the chemist itself that they were sold. Because there was no tamper-proof seals back then. So you could literally just open it up, take them out and put in other tablets. And no one would know because there's no tamper seals.
God, I mean, why? So they've never found anyone who'd done it?
No, they didn't have, because it was a very hard, if you think about it, it's a very hard crime to work back, because especially there's no real motive. Normally a killer is caught on a motive. There's only so many reasons someone will kill. They'll kill for love, revenge, money, or the crack, I guess, is the worst one. If they're doing it for a laugh, you can't tell who's done what. There's no link to the victim, there's no motive behind it. You can't really tell, and you can't find it out. And there was, of course, the tablets are eaten, so that there's no evidence particularly, and those bottles have been handled by God knows how many people, so there's no forensic evidence particularly to do. And you can't even, I mean, something like cyanide can't be tracked back, can it, in terms of who bought it, because you can get it anyway. You can create it yourself from seeds, can't you? Apple seeds.
God, really? I didn't know that about cyanide.
It's a lot of apple seeds. Because I know my my nephew in front of me just literally ate a whole apple, core and all, and I freaked out, going, "There's cyanide in those seeds. What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, come on, Auntie. There's going to be, you can't do. It's not going to be loads of seeds." He's like, "I'll eat another one." I was like, "No." What are you trying to do to me?
I love when kids do that. Oh yeah. So you're trying to keep me alive. You're trying to keep me safe. Well, keep going. I'm gonna test you on that. The chocolate that really worries me. Like, because you just pick it up off the shelf, wouldn't you? And you don't look. I wouldn't look for any like pinprick holes in the packaging.
And of course, it was really easy to buy poison in the Victorian era. You could just go in and buy strychnine and arsenic. You know, there was arsenic in the wallpaper. People took arsenic to keep their skin pale because that was seen as being desirable.
Yes.
And you could just go, like, you know, ostensibly you were meant to sign a poison register, but, you know, I think a lot of the time people didn't. And yeah, you could just go along and say, oh, I've got some rats in my backyard. Can I have some strychnine? And that was it. So it's, you know, it's incredibly easy to get hold of this as well. And there was quite a panic in the Victorian era about poisoning because it was seen as a woman's way of killing.
Yeah.
Because women were seen as the ones who cooked food and, you know, sort of like ran the home. And it was sort of seen as this kind of you didn't need any force to poison somebody. You could just stick something in their food. So there was a lot of worry about it at the time.
Unless you forcibly put a bit of chocolate in their mouth.
Yeah.
How did she? You know, just look, honestly, no, it's sticky. Let me put it in for you. Honestly, hands are clean. I had a bath last October.
Open up, Mrs. Beard.
Yes,
Here comes the aeroplane.
But yeah, and the whole thing is and there is a sort of slightly double entendre, you know, undertone to it all, where you sort of think, so he's sitting in a room with his wife and his ex-mistress, and his ex-mistress is feeding his wife. It all came out in the trial, and they said, oh yeah, she definitely did. She pushed a chocolate into my mouth. And you think, I don't even know how you could do that to somebody. But unless you're just being really polite and you're thinking, I can't say no, I'm just going to have to take this.
And I kind of think a bit more suspicion should have gone on Mr. Beard if he's sitting there letting this go on. Like, if he's there, surely he's part of this. And then he's gone, oh no, it's all right. Throw the suspicion off. Just buy a box of Cadbury's and chuck it in there, and then no one will ever suspect us. No one's ever going to suspect you anyway, mate. Because why would a man poison anyone?
He had a bit of a chocolate feeding fetish or something, and she was just kind of leaning into it.
You do sort of wonder, you know, maybe he was just sitting there going, yeah, keep feeding her the chocolate. That's what I like. Yeah, and as I say, you know, I tried putting all these things in because I'd done all my research, and I was at that stage where I used to think, if I've done the research, it's going in the book. And people reading it are going, but that wouldn't happen. I said, but it really did happen. But yeah, it's so indiscriminate. It's so terrifying, the thought that you could be, this little boy, he was just on holiday. I think it was the first day of the holiday. They just got there and he wanted a treat, and that was it. He was gone. But I don't just write about dead children, can I just say?
We also teased the listeners about taxidermy, didn't we?
Oh yeah.
Which is a sentence I never thought I'd utter. So Bridget, tell us about the taxidermist.
Walter Potter.
Walter Potter. So Walter Potter is, I love Walter Potter. So he was a taxidermist. Again, it was one of those things, I kind of came across him, you know, literally, you know, I go down research rabbit holes and I find things, and sometimes I think, that's really great, I need to put that in a book. I don't know how to get it in.
In some cases, it's a whole classroom of stuffed rabbits made in 1888, isn't it?
Yes, doing difficult maths. One of them has thrown his pencil down in frustration. He has weddings. It's all stuffed animals. They're kind of quite frighteningly stuffed, but they're sort of anthropomorphized. I can't think what the word is, but they're made to look like they're human. So that he has weddings and things. And apparently there's one that he has where there's a wedding, and if you lift the bride's dress,
oh no,
she is wearing little knickers underneath, and I think she's a mouse or something like that. So he created these sort of tableaux that they're just so weird. Like he'll have, like, you know, squirrels smoking cigars and drinking wine, and
it's like the Victorian version of Creature Comforts, isn't it? You know, who did that? Who does the Wallace and Gromit? Is it Nick Park Studios? You know, remember the Creature Comforts? Yeah.
Yeah, it is like that.
I thought more Sylvanian Families. Do you remember Sylvanian Families? Surely that came from there.
But I found these and I sort of locked it away in my mind, and I thought one day, and then in The Innocents, I bring in this new character who's not in The Tumbling Girl, Dorothy Lawrence, she's a bookkeeper. She's incredibly stylish. Minnie describes her as being all curves and hair, and her father is I sort of based him on Walter Potter. So when Albert first goes to visit her in her office to ask her about something to do with the case, there's this. I have the classroom there of the rabbits doing the really difficult maths, and then I kind of expand on this a bit in a later book because I just think it's so freakishly odd. And apparently, now I could have this wrong, but apparently Damien Hirst tried to buy the complete collection of Walter Potter's works, and he was unsuccessful in his bid, and they got kind of dispersed throughout the world when they went up for sale, which is a great shame because there should be a Walter Potter museum, I think. And he's not terribly well known. There is this book that I bought on him that has got all his works in, and they're just so outlandish and bizarre. And it is that thing that I find things in research, and obviously some things I find are really dark and disturbing, but then I find things like this and I think that's got to go in. How do you not put that in a book somehow? And then in the afterwards, you can just direct your readers to Walter Potter if they're interested in never sleeping again.
Well, it's so detailed, isn't it? Because there's one, he's got the death and burial of Cock Robin has got over 100 British birds in it, some of whom are now extinct. The species no longer are seen, and that they are shown crying with glass tears in their eyes.
When you sent me to look up a taxidermist, I had the most gruesome thoughts you could imagine. And when I looked and I saw what he was doing, I was like, oh, that's nothing. And then I was like, well, what crime has he committed? So that kind of shows you where my mind's at. And I was thinking, he committed no crime. Next.
No, he didn't commit a crime. I suppose
No.
you could say a crime against good taste. And you also wonder where he got all the animals from. I mean, I know, the Victorians were not terribly stringent on,
animal welfare.
Getting animal welfare or plant welfare, or just, we want that, we'll have that. But, where did he get them all from?
Well, I heard he put out chocolate that he got from Maynard's shop. Just put it out on the bird table, and they all came to him.
He placed it gently in the birds' mouths.
There is one more thing that I'm absolutely desperate to talk to you about, Bridget, and that is it, Nicky, what's it called? Bridget was telling that.
Well, these are the things that I actually expected to see when you said about Walter Potter, and it's the Anatomical Venus.
Yeah, so the Anatomical Venus.
Talk about going from the kind of funny and childlike to the crazy and dark. I mean, good grief.
This is very dark. So again, I found this out during my PhD research, couldn't use it at all in that, and thought, I'm going to lock that away somewhere. So anatomical Venuses were ostensibly designed to help medical students learn about female anatomy. So they were quite often full-size figures. They were really expensive, the full-size ones. They were often kind of carved out of porcelain. They were beautiful, beautiful women. They'd have, hair. They'd often have pearls around their neck. They'd be reclining on chaise longue and often looking, I'm trying to phrase this without being too explicit, but often looking like they might have just recently had quite a nice time.
Mm-hmm. So much so, their insides fell out.
Yes. And so then what you could do was they would have like a sort of panel on their stomach, and you could lift this panel off, and there were all their internal organs, all made of, various materials. Sometimes there would be a little length of red ribbon, and on the end of that would be a little fetus. And they are,
oh my goodness,
they're really bizarre when you see them, because the woman's facial expression looks like she's just sleeping, or she's extremely relaxed, or rather pleased with herself. But the idea being that they were used to teach anatomy, and you kind of think, well, why do the women have to look like they do in order to ostensibly teach medical students about anatomy? Yeah, so that one was locked away in my thoughts, and so that features in The Tumbling Girl. There is a character in that who he has rather ghoulish interest in the female form, let's say. He maintains that something he's shown Albert is merely an anatomical Venus. And they had anatomical Adonises as well, so they did have them as men, but I think they existed on a much more widespread scale of women. I can't imagine why that would have been. Yeah, they were just, and they had tiny ones as well. You can go to places like the Wellcome Museum and they've got small ones, but it's this kind of element of it's the conjunction of they look like a sort of sculpture that you might see in a gallery or a museum, and then you open them up and there they are, all their innards that you can take out and have a look at and then put back in, hopefully in the right order, so you're not left thinking, what do I do with the large intestine? I can't cram it back in anymore. Yeah, I mean, the Victorians, they were weird. There's no getting away from it. They were weird.
They were.
And in the articles that I read about these, the most disturbing fact is that these anatomical Venuses were more described as kind of beautiful and sexy, and that the death of a woman is sexy, and they even quote like Edgar Allan Poe, you know, the beauty of death, and it's just kind of worrying. It's not even described as, I mean, it's kind of vaguely described as medical equipment, let's say. But the majority of articles that I saw about it just were borderline on the kind of philia, let's say, side of it, in terms of men seeing a part of a woman that they wouldn't normally see. And it kind of, you know, we've just done a show, Lisa, haven't we, on Jack the Ripper? And I put forward a lot of my suspects, which I'm sure Bridget would be well into.
Oh, definitely.
And I think you should come back, Bridget, and and talk more about Jack the Ripper with us.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I want to know who your suspect is. But anyway, that's where we're going well off point. The whole thing just felt a bit icky, generally.
Well, it listening to it now, it makes me think of that idea that basically most of our medical procedures and medical research historically has all been around the 30-year-old white male, hasn't it? There hasn't been anything done to consider any different ethnicities, any differences of gender, and that's why, you know, there are various things for women, menopause being one of them, where the research is massively behind and women aren't supported. And I wonder, this kind of, for me, feels a bit like this version of women, you know, even in a medical, trying to think about how we help women is done in this sexual weird way. And yeah, like you say, Nicky, the kind of icky bit of it, the very icky bit of it, of why we might want a really beautiful woman who looks like she's just had a great time that we can take apart and put back together.
Yeah, and it really is very good. There's a brilliant book that was written by Joanna Ebenstein, which is really heavily illustrated. And some of these things that were made are they're just so disturbing and dark. And yet, as you say, it's all done. I recently went to the Hunterian Museum in London, which again, don't go if you are weak stomached, I would say. But they have the most astonishing things in there of like women who died when they were heavily pregnant. And so they kind of, they exposed the child in the womb, and then they sort of pickle the whole thing. And you're thinking, and again, I'm sure they would have said, it's for scientific advances and so that we can understand what happens. But you're thinking, did she have any say in this? And almost certainly she was poor, and she didn't. I'm sure she wouldn't have had any say in it, and there would have been no financial recompense for the fact that she'd given her body to science. But yeah, they are.
Where's all the pickled penises? Where are they? I want those in a museum to make men endlessly feel uncomfortable as they walk past.
They're in the freak show. That's where they are.
To be fair, there are some pickled penises in the Hunterian. So I think in the interest of equality, they do try to, and they have some diseased pickled penises in the Hunterian.
Oh, I think some sort of school trip for like boys. Sort of 15, 16-year-old boys on a school trip.
Would you sign that permission slip? Yes, go to the Pickled Penis Museum.
I think we do that as part of a feminist education.
What's being sold in the gift shop? That's what I want to know.
Gonna get a little mini one on a keyring. Oh dear. Right, we say the Victorians are bad, but maybe I'm catching up there. Bridget, we are coming to an end, I'm afraid, and I'm really sad because I've had a great time. What's next for you? So I know that The Innocents has very recently come out.
Yeah.
And we know that you're working on something else you've told us a little bit about. Is there anything else you want to tell us about before we finish?
Yes, the third book in the Variety Palace Mysteries is coming out next year. It's called The Spirit Guide. So it's about the Victorians' interest in spiritualism, and it's also about my interest in cults. Because I find the whole thing about cults really interesting.
Don't let her out. Don't let her out. Keep her here. We have a lot more to talk about.
We're going to get you a pillow and a blanket and a crust of bread.
Yeah.
Make it last.
We'll give you a little string to ring to try and ring the bell to get out, but we're not going to put a bell on the top.
Yeah.
We'll gently place that crust of bread in your mouth.
So that's the next one. Yeah, that was really good fun, researching that and discovering all the little tricks of spiritualists and what people were up to. And yeah, I am obsessed. I love things about cults. I love things about how people get sucked into cults and don't because obviously nobody says today I'm going to join a cult. But how it happens that you suddenly find yourself in there and think, oh my God, how did and often really intelligent people get sucked into these things. So that's what's coming up. That's next year, The Spirit Guide.
Promise us you will come back on when that comes out.
Oh, I'd love to. I would love to come back on.
You're contractually obligated now that you've said that on.
Yes.
You've said it aloud.
I've noted it down. We've got evidence now. So thank you so much, Bridget. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you for our last two podcasts over the last 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. Nicky, is there anything you want to say before we finish?
Just that listeners should find all of Bridget's books and clearly read them all and listen to them all on audio. If you've got a BorrowBox account, you can listen to them there. And yeah, the books are amazing, and obviously Bridget knows her stuff.
Yeah. And if you've also enjoyed us having a chat with Bridget over the last couple of weeks, please subscribe to the Red Rabbit Hole podcast and keep following us. Join us again. We've got more authors coming on and more also things that Nicky and I are doing together. I won't call her Nick. She'll tell me off.
I said that was fine, Lisa.
And please follow us on our social media. We are on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at the Red Rabbit Hole. We also have a Patreon, so if you cannot wait for our next episode, sign up on Patreon and you can have early access to that, as long as some other little goodies. Maybe, I don't know what we can. Maybe we'll make the poem available there.
We'll do a dramatic reading.
Oh yes, we'll do a dramatic reading of the whole of the poem.
The whole works of William McGonagall.
Well, that's it. I think everyone's signing up right now. I reckon we should up the fee, to be fair. Well, thank you so much for joining us, listeners, and we'll see you next time down the Red Rabbit Hole. Bye-bye.
Thank you for sticking with us, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.